Let's go here now. Parenting is a difficult job, no doubt, with no manual or do-overs. Now, parents do make mistakes, actually, but a line must be drawn when parenting is toxic. Childhood wounds from abusive or dysfunctional parents can be carried into adulthood. To help us understand what toxic parenting is and how to do better is clinical psychologist and president of the International Union of Psychological Science, Dr. Saths Cooper. Always a pleasure chatting to you. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. When is a situation toxic? Any situation, before we get into parenting?
Well, I think when you feel an inability to continue dealing with it, that's going to lead to serious problems. Any loss of serious control, any inability to deal with what you are supposed to be dealing with, and it's the spiraling into anger and frustration and sometimes into physical violence.
We've just come from festivities, a time for family, a time for love, a time to share food, etc. But a lot of people didn't go home because they're like, I don't know if I want to deal with my family this year. How do you identify that your family is toxic, or the relationship that you have with your parents is toxic?
Well, I think
is there such a thing?
There isn't, let's start from the other side. There isn't an ideal family. I think if anybody calls in or says, look, I come from an ideal family, then there's probably a denialism there. All of us have issues that we come to understand with certain family members, sometimes with siblings or with parents, and often we grow out of it, and we ought to grow out of it. But when we're stuck in that place, then it's a serious problem. Then it's what social media and others call toxic. But if we recognize we come from a particular past personally, and there's a space to reflect on it, but not to imprison you in that past, then I think we're dealing with what's called normal.
Right. Let's talk about that past that we come from. So you find that a parent would come back from home at 7 o'clock. They've got 3 children, maybe a girl and a boy. They come back and they say, okay, but why did you not cook? Why did you not make sure that the clothes are clean for everybody else? Now, that parent is coming back from a very tough situation. They probably work in retail somewhere. They're not getting paid that much. They're pulling in long hours, and they come home and they're expecting some help, but they're expecting it from a child.
I think it's unreasonable to expect that from a child, unless you also work in a cooperative way to make your child understand what their roles and responsibilities are. And you've touched on something that's quite important. Children must bear certain tasks and chores from an early age, because that's how we grow, and we weaned out of a dependency to understand that each one of us plays a role within the home and outside the home. Otherwise, we'll end up like much of our population, wanting it for ourselves. Me, taking, wanting something, but not in turn reciprocating, not giving. Life is about shared responsibilities, and it's the crass saying, it's not a bed of roses. We need to mediate life's issues. So parents need to actually explain to their children what is expected of them, and also not to put too high a burden on our children, because you can actually thwart their developmental milestones by sticking them with parental responsibilities. How many of us have not parentified and acted as parents to our younger siblings? And sometimes it's good to do that, but there's also a big brother and a big sister role that one must play. You cannot be a surrogate parent when you're a child yourself. The other side of it is, a lot of us have children at a very early age. So we haven't gotten out of our own neediness. We haven't realized, we haven't self-actualized. And if you're a teenage mother and your child is now pubescent, you look like sisters often, and you're competing with that poor offspring with clothes and stuff like that, and it becomes problematic. The same with young fathers. exactly the same. And for some guys, it becomes a macho thing. Well, I'm taking my teenage son into the pub, I'm doing these macho things and so on. But there is a parent role, which is not the same as we are on the same par. Yes, we equal, but other things are not so. There's a learning role, there's a teaching role, and parents need to play that, because otherwise we expect them to be trained in school only, whereas they take what they come with from home into the school arena. And if you've got I'm still shocked that in Soweto, in some of the better schools, there's 50 to 60 pupils in a school. And so when you get into that stage and you have all these kids coming from each of their homes with their issues, you can imagine the chaos that will ensue. And that is something that we ought not to just leave to authorities. We need to do it in the home. We need to bring our kids up in the way we would have wanted to be brought up ourselves. A lot of us weren't brought up in the way we would like. We were spanked, we were beaten, we were scolded, we were screamed at, and all sorts of things. But do we want to replicate that on our kids?
And then what do you do once you realize that a situation does not serve you the way you were oriented into it, or the way you were socialized into it? There are many things that adults pass on to children. So you inherit a dislike for an auntie or an uncle. You don't even know why.
Absolutely.
But your parent is like, you see that one, we're not even going there. What then do you do to rectify things like that for yourself?
Well, I think that for a lot of kids, kids are very bright. They pick up things. They pick up things through all senses. They see, they hear, they watch. The untold, angst or anger that comes with a particular expression, they're very intuitive and they can pick it up very, very quickly. So they pick it up and they understand, oh yes, Dad has this problem with his brother because there's a rivalry. And sometimes kids can manipulate that situation because they become the favorite of that uncle who's not liked at home, or vice versa, or they become the bane of that uncle. I'll never forget, a very well-known politician used to say things about somebody else, and one day we were in the house and the little boy blurted out, "So you are so-and-so." And everyone kept quiet because out of the mouth of babes. So we need to be very careful what we say. Kids pick it up, and we may say it in our bedroom between parents, but the kids are listening. And what we do in the bedrooms, and our groans and our squeals of joy and so on, our kids pick that up as well. So we need to learn that we're in a house where we have our needs as adults, but we also have parents who have needs that need to be fulfilled from our tutoring and our caring. And sometimes they're frustrated because they'll test us all the time, and that's part of the parenting experience. As you said in your opening, there's no manual for it. And if somebody comes with these perfect little manuals, they're actually lying to us. It is about a little bit of trial and error, but all the research, all the expertise is available out there, and one should rely on that. One should rely on school experts, one should rely on other experts in society to be able to deal with the difficulties one has. It's not easy.
It's not easy at all. Also, you can't give what you don't have. Hey, so you find people arguing that there are some, no one has a right to say someone shouldn't have a child, but just by observing a behavior, you wonder whether that person was actually ready to even have a child, because they're not equipping them with the skills that they need to get through life. Basic things. We're not even talking about education. In such instances where you don't even realize yourself as a parent that whatever it is that you're feeding into your child, you are grooming an adult that will be as toxic. What do you do?
Well, look, in your earlier segment, we dealt with the issue of the number of kids that are abandoned and so on. And usually the church, religious institutions, would be counseling, would be parents. I don't think that is happening to the extent that it ought to happen. Our society is in crisis. We're in crisis at all levels, and that crisis reflects in our institutions. So when our churches are beginning to fail us as well by not taking would-be parents through the usual types of counseling, we should know that we've got a problem, because that's where it usually happens. Are you ready? Why are you wanting to marry at this age? Just yesterday I was traveling with my daughter who's 25, and she was pointing out that some of the kids who are younger than her are getting married and engaged. And she was saying, this is something that she can't understand, and I tended to agree with her. I know my own mother used to say, never get married before you are 30. I actually didn't do that. I got married younger. But that's part of the issue of growing up. It's part of the issue of challenging yourself and your life. But if it becomes overwhelming, then you need to take a step back and you need to say, I need help. That foresight, that insight into saying, I need help, is a tremendous strength. It's not a weakness. Because the weakness is when you perpetuate the mistakes and you become, as you say, toxic.
Last one, very quickly for us. So there's this notion of black tax. Don't even know what that means, whether it's like, you have to take care of where you come from. So with guilt, people who feel incredibly guilty from separating from their families or situations that no longer serve them.
Well, I think you will get that, but time does heal that, and you need to actually start letting go. Certain things that have happened in the past, you cannot turn the clock back and say, I will relive this. If I had my life again, will I do it? No, I think you need to just live for what you are dealing with at that time and plan for the future. And also it's important to live every day fully, without regret, without carrying anger against somebody else, because our shoulders are too small. They're not intended to carry that weight.
Our shoulders are too small. Thank you very much, Dr. Cooper, for joining us. Always a great pleasure chatting to you. Clinical psychologist, Dr. Saths Cooper. Do stay with us. When we come back, what trends should you be looking out for in 2019? We'll bring you those details and more in a moment.